I do all that. I do all that post production.
Oh, okay. So whatever you want to do to get it started, and if
Similar to what I've done, what I just did with Greg. Like, hey, Greg, good to see you. How do we sound? We're pretty chill in the beginning, and at some point we'll find that whole. All right, what was it? It was Trevor last night did a whole. Well, let's just rock and roll. Let's jump right in. I'm like, there we go. There's my cue.
That's it. That's what I would say, since it's being recorded anyway, right? So you can go back and say, if Walid jumps and starts talking off of what your introduction, great. If he need if I need a question to get it going, then we could take it there. So I listen most of the time. Like you said, the technology, when it goes to technology, I kind of zone out a little bit, but for these type of things.
Well, and eventually we will have talked about it enough. You'd be like, you know what? I've heard Shaun talk about it enough. I'm pretty sure this is how it works.
You would think a little bit. It's like that when The Simpsons and they go to France and Bart says, "Why haven't I learned how to speak
Immersion?"
French?
Yes. Immersion, and all of a sudden he's complaining in French at the end of that's a great episode.
Exactly. So it's like, okay, well, I don't think it's going to happen, but we could hope. This coming from, of course, I got out of grad school. I changed the requirements. I made them feel guilty because when I entered, there was no computer science requirement. And then towards the end, you have to, I'm like, whoa, hold on. I'm in this program a year and a half already. You can't ask me to go back and do this, and this.
I should be grandfathered in. Yeah.
I should be grandfathered in. So they gave me something else, which I greatly took and avoided even more exposure to technology and what I've worked with Netcore.
Hey, that's smart though.
But
it wasn't your thing.
Wasn't my thing. I'm good at, the other side of it. There has to be the relationship guy, like you said, big picture guy. Now you guys go build it.
I just texted. I was reminded because I like to look at the LinkedIn profile. Like during the Greg call, I've got Greg's LinkedIn profile up here, so I can I've got his name there. It's a reminder of who I'm talking to, aside from just the video. But then if I needed to, I can kind of remind scroll down and be like, CEO and co-founder of Kourts. Okay, and so I can just kind of have the guys' credentials in front of me.
Sure.
But then one of the other guys that we talked about, Danny Donut, the guy at Buckhead Life Group, I saw on LinkedIn, like, it's 19 years at Buckhead Life. I'm like, ooh, I need to text. So I grabbed the phone. I'm like, all right, hey Danny, we got to talk.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. We got to get the chef on. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's CFO for the whole Buckhead Life Group, so we will definitely be talking to him.
Yeah, so he's the kitchen manager. Good. He's the guy who runs to make sure that their expenses stay in line.
And he's a part-time tennis coach. I mean, he's worked in the area, kind of after work, goes and teaches some ladies teams and some kids, and he's a real tennis guy. Walid.
Gentlemen, how are you?
Hello, sir.
It's good to hear and see you both.
So where are you? I wanted to make sure. Are you in Dubai or are you in Europe?
I'm in Dubai right now. It's 7 p.m. out here.
We wanted to be cognizant of that. Make sure you don't stay up past your bedtime.
That's very kind, but it's still early.
And he's been busy renovating the house all day. Have you been working all day? All right.
Well, not me myself, but you have to be on site. But it's fine. It's totally fine.
Well,
how have you guys been?
Very good.
We're good. I want to let you know kind of where we are. I'm sure you saw the YouTube notification, and we'll record audio. The video is just for fun at this point, and so nothing other than the YouTube live is recording. Nobody watches it, so it's a thing for us to have up there. So if at some point it becomes a thing, it's there. At this point, it's a pretty laid back conversation between friends, and at some point we'll have, in the next couple of minutes, we'll have that kicking off point where somebody says, okay, and here's our first, we'll get into it. But in the beginning, we like to say, okay, how do we sound? Everybody's mics work, and do a bit of a mic check and a hello between friends before we worry about doing any official introduction or start to anything we would put out as a podcast.
That's totally fine with me. Look, it's a conversation that's so easy for me to have due to passion about the subject. So I'm more than happy, as I said, to both of you, that I'd be happy to join and have this discussion. So with pleasure.
Well, I think, Walid, we'll start with the Walid Fattah of 2018, or when did you start working on Kourts?
So we started in 2015. We went live in 17. And
let me go back a second and say Kourts was designed to do what? What was the, the stimulus behind it? What did you see in the market that required, tennis to adopt a reservation system?
So I think the best way when we start recording, correct?
Yes.
So I think the best way to present it, and that's typically the way I do, is I talk about passion for the sport. I talk about technology in so many industries and seeing how antiquated tennis is. And that was the real motivator behind starting this business, right? Driven by an issue that I had myself, is, being able to find a tennis court, being able to find a clinic, being able to find partners, and everything. And it's just, tennis is so inaccessible if you compare it to yoga and so many other sports, where today it's not only a question of having plenty of studios, it's just the ability of finding them. And tennis is so behind from that perspective. And that was really the motivator behind building this. So I think that I'm more than happy to, jump in and say, hey, 2015, frustration gate got to a certain point where I decided that we have to see if we can turn this into a business and how we can grow the sport of tennis.
And at this time, you were in the States.
No, I was in the States as of 17 when we went live. So the initial idea came, I've traveled all around the world. My story, grew up in Switzerland, lived on 5 continents, 4, and had the same issue everywhere. It's not a US issue. It's not a European issue. It's a global issue when it comes to growing the sport of tennis. I don't want to talk about the USTA because I'm not a USTA basher. People think that they should be the ones that have the solutions. Change starts with us, not with the USTA. So if you want to ask a question, I'll say what I think. But so really, the fact of me moving to the US was just because of the sheer size of the industry in the US. So that's why 2017, after building the prototype and doing that, that's when we went to 2017, and when I moved to the US.
So when did you start marketing? When did you go live with Kourts?
So we went live in 2 different sections, right? So in the what we call SaaS enabled marketplace, which is typically what Kourts business is, software as a service enables a marketplace. So we sold the software to clubs that uses the software to run their entire facility, whether it's their memberships, whether it's their scheduling, whether it's their pro scheduling. And that then became the engine that powered the mobile app, which allows players to book. And obviously the technology is built in a way where members and non-members, depending if a club allows non-members, and if they do, great, non-members can book in a club at a certain fee. But if the club is members only, the settings on the facility allows the manager to only let their members book, right? So that's when it's 2 different timings.
So our paths began to cross in 2018. And to me, it was an unbelievable experience from the perspective, not only was technology being introduced to tennis, but it was being introduced in such a professional manner by an organization that was so different than most of the origin stories that are, oh, we had a stimulus, me and my brother, or me and my wife. You guys actually came in corporate setting, a plan, goals. Speak to that. It's been trying to function in this environment of tennis.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that my background is corporate, right? I worked for 20 years in the 2nd largest bank of Switzerland. So when you're used to that, you're formatted that way, right? So it's not something that I invented or anything. And I always believe that if you think that you want to change something in any industry that that might need it, and for me it was racket sports, it was tennis at first. I realized that if we wanted to do that, we had to do this very professionally. So what we started doing is, first of all, we started finding the right people that can build this. I've seen too many, I don't want to say horror stories, but I've seen too many stories of, tennis pros or people in the industries try to learn how to code, build something overnight, try to promote it. Look, I think a pro is great on court. Let him teach people how to play tennis, and let IT professionals do what they do best, right? And code. So what we did is, back in 2017, we started interviewing what we call a CTO, a Chief Technology Officer. A chief technology officer is a pretty expensive person to join a team, just because of their knowledge, and they're the ones that are going to build the technology. They don't sell, they don't do anything, but they build the infrastructure that you're going to then sell. And so when we started doing that, we realized obviously that we needed someone that would know how to build something that could technically scale worldwide, different languages, different time zones, different sports. Just so many different solutions. And what we did is we found a team that was able to do that, and we acquired them. So again, it's not two friends getting together and saying, hey, let's start and do this in you know, at night or whatever. But we acquired a professional team that was full-time employed by Kourts, a team of 12 coders, and we started building Kourts. And people think that, you know, it's as easy as changing an Excel sheet. Technology is way more complex than that is. But well, so that's how we start.
That's a huge difference, because that isn't just, hey, we hired somebody to build this, we're paying this company to do a thing, and they're a vendor for us. You hired these people to work for you. Like they worked for Kourts. So it wasn't as though they were also working on other projects and you were just one of their clients. You brought them in and hired them to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. But we did that from an IT perspective. We hired an HR manager. Why? Because look, yes, in my career, I've interviewed people, but that's not my, you know, my strength is not there. So what we did is we hired an HR manager who then started interviewing people across the country. I mean, the US is 350 million people. So you can imagine the number of clubs that are out there, number of players that are out there, and we needed people. So at a certain given moment, we had people in 7 different states selling, and we have clubs in 34 different states across America. So you know, you have to be agile. You have to be able to have people in a certain region. Some states need physical presence, some others don't. They're comfortable through technology, right? And COVID has really, I hate saying this, but COVID has helped us. You know, a lot of people were afraid of technology for a very, very long time. But when COVID started, look, everyone suffered for sure. But when things started getting a little bit better, people understood that, you know, contact-free payment was like, this is awesome, right? I don't need to go and give cash or give my card or touch a keypad. You can book online, you can pay online. And it was just so much simpler. And this really helped our business, unfortunately, that through that way, but for people to understand the strength of technology.
And again, speak to the fact that you had reps throughout the country, and we focus on Atlanta. Yep. And as you found, Atlanta is a very diverse market than a lot of other places because it is more HOA subdivision driven than it is the traditional club. How do you manage a staff with so much difference going on throughout the country?
Look, I'll tell you, it's a very, very good question. And I'll take it even a step further from a technology standpoint. An HOA needs something different than a tennis academy, that needs something different from a private club, that needs something different than parks and recs in different cities. So the problem that you're talking about in Atlanta was, obviously, it was a bigger one just because of the scale of it. And to come back to 2017, initially, when we were going to start Kourts in the US, we debated about opening our offices. We chose California more from, and again, to go back to the corporate world, we raised money, right? We weren't going to try and do this with a few dollars. So we went to professional investors, and we raised money to be able to build the team, to do the acquisition of the tech team that we acquired, and to be able to scale. And one of the cities that we debated about was Atlanta, to move to Atlanta. And why? Just because we looked at the sheer numbers across the US. We did a partnership with the Tennis Industry Association at the time. Great team out there, and they had a lot of data that they shared with us, and it allowed us to build a map. So what we did is we built a map of the US, and we put a point for every single facility that was across America. So you could see the concentration of the number of clubs in the US. And I'm not sure a lot of people had done that before, but that really gave us a very clear idea of, okay, where are the key markets? Where do we start? Which state did we start in? You know, me coming from Europe, the US was more complicated for me from a geographical standpoint, because I know that if I want to target Germany, I need to have German-speaking people, and you have a country of 80 million people, and you go for it. In the US, you have 50 states, you have 350 million people. It's the same language, same currency, same country, but it's different cultures, right? So for me, it was a little challenging from that standpoint, but we had a lot of people that helped us out from that standpoint, and it really, really helps. From the Atlanta perspective, what's incredible, and Bobby, you know, because we met many times in Atlanta, I used to come every month. I was just impressed to see that you'd walk into a supermarket, you know, the guy or girl behind the counter has a tennis racket because she's playing that same day. Whether it's an HOA, whether it's in any of the city facilities or anywhere, it was just incredible to see that. The HOAs, you're right, have different needs, But again, do you really want to walk all the way to the club where they have the full course to see if there's a court that's available, and you have to come back and you don't know how to book, and it's often complicated with a recreational center? So our platform really also helped HOAs to make things easier, meaning, look, you want to book a court for Friday night, 5 p.m. Well, you go into your app, onto the website, and you're part of an HOA, you're allowed to book, and you'll see if it's booked or not. And if it's not booked, you can book a court. That, I think, really did help HOAs from that standpoint. One thing that we also did, and that's where technology can really help, and I'm going to go in more maybe in more into the sort of the revenue side of the business, and not everyone likes that. But what was incredible was to see that a lot of clubs thought that the occupancy rate was pretty high. We looked at an average across a full year. And the reason we did that is you have seasons, so you have indoor and outdoor clubs. And we really wanted to try and do, research that they really, gave us a number that was interesting. And the average occupancy rate of a club that has 6 courts across the nation, across the year, is 42%. So that means that less than half of the time of the available time, your courts are booked, the rest they're empty. And what was so interesting is what we were able to do is we were able to tell private clubs, look, why don't you put 2 of your courts online where people can pay to play? That's extra revenue, and potential people that, hey, look, I want to play tennis, but this is a private club. I'm not going to sign up and be a member there. Let me just go and play for an hour or 2. So from a revenue standpoint, that helps some of the clubs. From the private club standpoint as well, what was interesting is, in most cases, private clubs will not allow you to play if you're not a member there. But if you want to take a private lesson or a clinic, you can. So the way we built our platform allowed non-members in a private club, if the private club, once again, allows it. So it's all about settings. But a private club could say, yep, so you're a member, you want to sign up for this clinic, it's $60 an hour. You're a non-member, you pay $75. So now you had non-members walk through a club that was a private club where they would have never gone if they did not know that they could book clinics that way. So it was pretty interesting for us to see how that helped some of the private clubs grow.
And that was one of my favorite features about Kourts, which was that idea of being able to share. That idea of, okay, I've got publicly available events now where other court reservation systems and other club management systems, it's all for the club. It's just me, only my members or my homeowners here can see it. But on Kourts, you could share it, and I could say, hey, we've got drills here, and the world could see it. And you guys were global, so it was the world. And in Atlanta, we're not all concerned about who can see it in Switzerland. But that's just a neat thing to be able to share it with anybody driving by. It was a distance, and you could log in and see it and go, oh my gosh, there's a clinic right here. And that's one of the things we don't have in general anywhere, is that publicly available. I can find a drill, or I can find a coach, and I can find a court. It was a cool publicly available feature. I liked it.
It's funny you say that, and I won't make the story too long, but we had a great club that was in South California, one of the first clubs that we signed, 16 courts, I think one of the most busy USTA run tournament facility across the country. And the incredible thing is, this manager, great guy, one day calls me up and says, hey, look, you know what just happened? I said, tell me, please. And he had one of the events over the weekend, a USTA event. And on the Friday, someone walks into the clubhouse and says, where's court number 14? And he says, court number 14 is out there. Who are you? He says, no, I booked a court. Thanks. And he walked out. And the club manager went onto the court scheduling, and looked at it and saw on court number 14, it was a kid that was playing the tournament that found the club on Kourts, made a booking on the court for him to practice before the tournament, and had paid for it. And the manager couldn't believe that someone that was from the east side of the country came all across America to California to play that tournament, found his club on Kourts, booked a court, paid for it, and came and practiced. So that's really, look, I want to say it's extraordinary, but it's not. We've all used technology that way. I'm not going to talk about the Uberization of the world, but we've all had the ability of booking your restaurants through Open Table. There's so many platforms in so many industries, and tennis is just so far behind, unfortunately. So it was a beautiful story when we heard it, and there's a lot of those that we got word.
And that's great. It goes back to the no contact thing. We have a similar ability with my business, Tennis for Children, which you and I have spoken about in the past, and we have people just register. Who's this? I don't know. Kid shows up the next week. We don't have to take a phone call. Not that we mind taking phone calls, but the online, the software, the service is there, and it says, here's what we offer. Sign here, pay here. We'll see you on Tuesday.
Look, I think your point is exactly right, and I'm going to come back to the restaurant booking for your people listening here. I can't be bothered to pick up a phone and call a restaurant to make a booking. To be told, press 1 if you want to know the address, press 2 if you want to know the opening hours, press 3 if you want to make a booking for a birthday of more than 10 people. No, look, I just want to know if you have space for tonight for me and my wife. That's all I want to know. And the incredible thing is that today, with, again, platforms like OpenTable, I don't need to call a restaurant. Why should I want to call a restaurant? And I'm sure, again, everyone here listening has gone through this horrible experience of having to call a restaurant and not getting the answer that they want quickly. And tennis is no better. Look, I keep telling clubs and told them throughout, and we'll talk about the acquisition of Kourts, but throughout the entire tenure of Kourts, I used to tell clubs, I'm like, look, if you have a schedule on your desk on pen and paper, whether it's for clinics, private lessons, or for your courts, that means someone has to be there and pick up the phone to give an answer. If I call and your club manager or whoever's at the front desk is busy, I won't be able to book. And the incredible thing that we realized with Kourts, again, doing data analysis, because we used to do a lot of that, was a club that would use technology. And I don't really want to push Kourts here, but I really want to talk about technology in the sport. The incredible thing is on our platform, 12 months after a club joins the platform, occupancy rate is up by 14%, 14%. 14% occupancy extra is, more people coming in, more bottles of water sold, more rackets strung, more technology. There's just so much more that happens. And that's just because it's just so easy to make a booking that, people just book more often. And I think, that's the real message that I've always wanted to try and get across.
Do you have any feelings that maybe you were still 2 years too early, and that so much of what you said now organically through such situations where people accepting that, you're not giving yourself enough credit. I mean, we met in 2018, and the fun part, again, the amazing part was the professionalism associated with an organization within tennis, which I hadn't seen before. An organization that did their homework, did research studies, did identify that 90% were still using pen and paper. I always laughed about the 42%. I was like, well, let me see, the courts are busy 9 to 12 and they get busy again 6 to 11. Okay. But you had done the research, and you're walking into an industry that really doesn't. It's more, I had a feeling, I had a gut. We would go in. I always felt like a lot of the times when we were talking to people, and let it be known, I was a huge advocate of Kourts. We'd go in to talk to people, and Walid would make this amazing presentation. And I always felt like he's doing too much educating. As he said, he would always speak to the need of technology. And I'd always, would you talk about Kourts? Would you talk about Kourts? Would you talk? But, and you did a great presentation with the GPTA. Same thing, with a room full of tennis instructors. And I always wondered, okay, they might be hearing about the need for technology, but by the time they're registering about Kourts, they're thinking about lunch already.
Look, again, with my background, my corporate background, you always think of, you have to plan forward, right? And if you want to get growth, there's a big part of education that you have to bring to the table. And I think, and not being condescending when I'm saying education, but I think that with my experience in technology and understanding how things function, the idea was always, look, if I try to sell something and people don't understand the value, we're wasting time, and I don't want to waste anyone's time, and I don't want to waste mine either. So what was more important for us, and I know, Bobby, you suffered from it going through some of the meetings, was more explaining to club owners, managers, or people in the industry, was more explaining the value of technology and how it can help. And it can help everyone in different ways. So yeah, we spent a lot of time on that. I used to tell my investors, look, if I could spend 40 cents to the dollar on education, I'd do that, because we would help people understand faster how we're trying to help the industry grow. And that was really one of the messages that was difficult to get across.
Well, I saw a lot of education that was targeted at the end user, and saying, hey, look how easy it is to book a court. And OpenTable, I think, is a great concept there. But they're still going to show up and then have to pay, and compared to the OpenTable concept. In tennis, we spend a lot of time trying to convince the user it's so easy. I think we miss selling it to the coach, who now has significantly less accounts receivable issues. And I think that's the biggest thing to say. Put down your pencil, spend the 3% on the Stripe cost or whatever the technology is. Spend the 3% so you can sleep at night and you're not chasing down money. I think that was a big sell that we missed sometimes with things like this, where we were focused on that end user conversation.
You know, you're so right. And we had this conversation over and over again with pros. And I kept on saying, look, you know, if you have to handle 60 kids in one day that you're training, and a mother's dropped one and a father's picked up the other one, and he's paid, she paid, you're not sure about this one, you just lost $20. Do that twice, 3 times in a day. That's hard cash that you've lost, right? Whereas on a technology platform, if someone books and they don't have a credit card, or when the card is debited, it doesn't work, the player or the parent gets an email saying your card was declined, your booking's canceled, right? So, and you, the pro, also gets informed about that. So I think that's something that definitely helps from a business standpoint. But again, it's a mentality. And I think to come back to Bobby's question just a little bit earlier, saying, were we 2 years earlier, too late, or whatever? I think, look, if you look at many different industries, and we were acquired by Playtonic, the largest booking platform in Europe. What's interesting is they grew with paddle. And the reason, and this is the European paddle, not the US paddle, but the reason I'm just mentioning this is because their growth was outstanding, was incredible. They've done an incredible job. But paddle is a much younger generation sport, not only from the players, but from the stakeholders, club owners, pros, the federation. And just because they're so much younger, they understand that who wants to call a club to make a booking? Who wants to call a club to find a clinic for themselves or for their child? Technology is just so good for that. And I think that tennis in the US, as I said a little bit before, you know, tennis is antiquated. And I think in the US, you know, the change is coming, but it's a little slow. I believe that, you know, in a few years from now, everyone will understand that, look, Facebook is great to go and look at pictures and write messages to friends. But if your club is on Facebook only, I need to go and dig within Facebook to try and find you. And it's very local. It gets very, very cumbersome. Mobile apps, you know, I don't need to mention today mobile apps. Look, and then if I take the example of Facebook up until 2012, when Facebook went public, I don't want to change subject here, but 90% of traffic was web, 10% was mobile. In 2020, that went the other way around. 90% of consumption on Facebook, people just going on Facebook, is on mobile, and 10% is on web. So I have no doubts that people are using their mobile phones way more, and therefore, you know, being on an app to make a booking for anything for that matter just makes so much more sense, just so much more easier.
I love being able to say, hey, Bobby, you were right. Because he's always telling me, we need an app, we need to get on the phone. It's on the phone. I'm like, but what about the web page? People still like web pages, right? And Bobby's like, we need to get on the phone. It needs to be mobile.
So technology is rubbing off just a little bit. From hearing all this for 20 years, being around technology-driven people, it is starting to rub off a little bit. Like I said, the great part is my feelings are validated, or have been validated through the years. And again, I got to go back to the demeanor and the calmness in which you brought to Atlanta. Again, and we focus predominantly on Atlanta, and you can tell me, you know, what we always like to know is how things go on in other places. When you were dealing with Atlanta and we were talking, and I always say, gosh, the frustration to me in introducing was the learning curve. You know, you have your sales cycle in your mind, and what did you want it to be? And in Atlanta, I always said, it's going to be longer. And one of the biggest problems, it goes back to the industry, is who do you talk to? You know, we talk about the pros. Well, I'm an instructor, I'm a director. I would say on a whole, they're fairly useless. You know, you're going to get your small majority that get motivated, see it, but the majority just have so much other things they're doing. We always talk about, you know, a tennis pro and Atlanta director in Atlanta is more a manager of egos than he is any great creator of events, because we have so many events. But it is so difficult in Atlanta to find the decision maker to validate your product, to say, okay, so, you know, how do you address that?
So you're 100% right. I think, you know, decision makers are the people you want to go to, but unfortunately, decision makers are not always the one that's behind the phone picking up when someone wants to make a booking, right? So there's a bit of a disconnect there, right? I'm the club manager. I know what's right for the club. Yeah, but you're not sitting at the front desk getting all those phone calls at 7 a.m. when people can start booking for that day. Right. So often, unfortunately, the decision maker is not always the best person to talk to just because he's not the one that has that daily problem. It's often the end user, which is the one that comes and says, hey, look, we love your platform. We've used it in this club in Atlanta. We also play in this facility in Georgia or sometimes in Florida because people had a house in Florida. And I'd say, hey, look, speak to your club. We're happy to go and speak to them and do a presentation. You've seen that work. So I think the end users are great ambassadors for our technology. That really helps. Now, when it comes to the decision maker, if it's someone that's really tennis, I almost use the word issue. I don't want to say the issue, but one of the tough points was that in a lot of cases, again, tennis managers and pros, we all know are, above the age of 50. They've been doing the same thing for 30 years. And now you have a little Swiss guy that comes to the US and comes to Georgia with himself or his team and says, hey, look, guys, you've been doing this wrong for 30 years. There's a much easier way of doing things. And I'm not criticizing anyone here, because when you've been doing something for 30 years and it works, why change it? But what if you could make it better and easier for your customers? And that's really one of the points where I found it difficult. You find the end user, the decision maker, but then you have to convince the decision maker that what he or she's been doing is not wrong, but could be done better. And I remember in Atlanta, what I thought was amazing, and I have to say, this is something that struck me. I mean, you can imagine we were in 34 states. I almost visited all of them. But in Atlanta, people were always willing. So whatever meeting we went to, and Bobby, you were part of some of them, look, there was always a great positive conversation. Did it end up in them using our platform? Not always, but that's their prerogative. I don't mind. And I know that we planted the seed, and that, further down the road, would I like them to be a customer yesterday? Of course. But, you have to be patient, and, everyone, changes. We take time to change, right? We all have a comfort zone, right? Change is difficult. But in Atlanta, I should say in Georgia, because we travel, quite a bit across Georgia, and people were always willing. People took the meetings. People brought people to the meetings. Really, it was something that I have to say was pretty good. Did we want to get more clubs on the platform? Absolutely. Because what's important as well in technology, and typically the technology that we created, is you want to create that marketplace effect. And the marketplace effect is having enough players use the technology where now, look, we have a club in a certain area in Atlanta. Great. Well, it's fully booked today. Now I know I can go to another one. And suddenly you have more and more people coming onto the platform playing. The one thing we hadn't launched before we got acquired was player matching. There's a statistic that came out from the USTA that says that the biggest reason for people not to play tennis is because they can't find a partner. And I'm not talking here about clinics or private lessons, but talking about a partner. And, we had hundreds of thousands of players on our platform. We had more than 150,000 bookings a week on Kourts. And what we were going to launch was the player matching, because that was something that was important. And in Atlanta, I just wish we had more clubs on the platform that would be able to create that marketplace effect where, like, hey, I'll play at that club tonight if someone is looking for a player. And that's one thing that's important that technology can really help with as well.
Well, that was the beauty, the idea, and it was such a great selling point. And I was a beneficiary of the open concept, that people could see it all over. The end user could see it. And I'd have people from Alpharetta, which is a substantial drive. Yep. I have one lady come from Marietta, and she's come more than once, and on the court said, I come here because, I come for the drills. And somebody looked at her and said, with me standing there, why would you drive 45 minutes to come to it? I said, well, first, thanks for that ringing endorsement. But, she's like, well, partially, yes, I enjoy it. And there's nothing between. And I found it on Kourts, and it was a great situation. One thing, again, and it speaks to the humility of the man and why it was such a great time we had doing this. First, we booked a lot of meetings, but remember, we're leaving one person out of that process, which was Patricia Jensen. And, of course, Patricia, if you did not take the meeting, there could be ramifications. So we did have a somewhat of a fear factor that, Walid can testament to. Like, if Patricia endorses, people listen.
Look, I hope she's listening, but she's been one of the most incredible ambassadors. She never liked that word, but she's really been a queen. Obviously in the industry, everyone knows her. She's done so much for tennis through her 4 kids, through her efforts, and she's always been good to everyone in the industry. And Bobby, you're right. So many meetings. She was able to create, events for us where we went and we presented in front of hundreds of people, which was incredible. And I think that, that again goes with showing that when someone is passionate, and I'm talking here about Patricia, she is so passionate about tennis that she can move things and she can make things happen. And that really, really did help us. And I think, you're right. We built a technology business. We raised money from investors. The idea, of course, when you do that is, you're there to make money. But at the end of the day, if you're not driven by passion, if you don't believe in your mission, there's no way you can succeed. And I think that having people like Patricia Jensen with us, you, Bobby, helped us so much across Georgia. We had people in California help us. It was really incredible to see how when you have motivated people that are genuine about something, how much it can make a difference and move the needle.
But it was, you gave so much. Again, another thing I love, and you can speak to this if I'm getting it wrong. I love the fact that you guys uncovered that the majority of the people who were playing tomorrow would look to book a reservation literally pretty much after the club closed. So how many when you're speaking to a club manager and you say to them, how many reservations are lost because there's no way to book the reservation? And it just didn't, I would always be amazed. Like, are you listening? In a sales, you look to how do I ease somebody's pain? You're showing them how to cut costs. You're showing them how they're losing money, and you'd still get blank looks. And
yeah,
I was amazed. And you were always so unbelievably patient. You never, like I said, you never would say, this is why you need Kourts. You would speak to technology and the need for technology, making it bigger than Kourts. And it was just impressive. It was easy to be an advocate.
But look, I think, Bobby, and I appreciate your message. Thank you, first of all. But I think, everyone has a different dynamic and a pace, right? We all think at a different pace, and everyone's different. And I don't think that just because you think you're right, you should convince people you're right. They need to be convinced themselves. They need to convince themselves. And I remember, and you might have been in some of those meetings, what I did sometimes, because you know what, it was, sometimes you're tired. You just you took the red eye, you get into Atlanta and you start doing meetings. We did 8, 9, 10 meetings. We drove a few hundred miles in a day, go to bed late, wake up the next morning at 5, do that again, and do that day in and day out for a week. But I remember that one of the examples that I used at the time was like, look, if I was alone in a meeting, I'd say, excuse me, do you have a phone number for a cab service? And they'd say, why? And I'd say, well, look, I don't have a car and I need to go from your club to another club. Don't you use Uber? Yeah. Like, oh, okay, you use Uber. So that was the first example I used, just to say, so you're telling me I can use Uber to book a cab to go from A to B, but to book a court in your club or a clinic, I need to call? How does that make sense?
You set them up, Walid. That's dirty.
Yeah.
That is dirty.
Look, Shaun, I had another one as well, which I said, like, hey, by the way, do you have a travel agent I can use? And they'd say, why the hell would you want a travel agent? I'm like, because I'm flying back to LA. I need to change my flight ticket. She said, well, you can go online or on the app of the airline company. I'm like, so you're telling me that I can book a flight through an app, but to book a court or a clinic in your club, I need to call. And it's always so good to do that example for people to understand.
We have a whole list of these, and we'll just put you with your own little bit that you can do. Be like, so you're telling me, that'll be the Walid bit. And he's like, so you're telling me that using a pen, I don't have to use a pencil for that, but I do have to use a pencil for this?
Look, sometimes it's the only way of really getting across to people, right?
Absolutely.
Show the pain point.
Point out they already do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. He'd show it, but they still wouldn't get it. That's what I said. We have a friend. I'll go a little further. That I was the best man at his wedding. That we introduced, runs a very large tennis organization that pitched, called, I'm going to do it. 4 years of this. He has just signed finally. So it took 4 years for him to finally reach a decision on the need for a court reservation system. Again, just, you hate to say it, it's still a business. It's a passion, but people need to eat. An organization needs to make money to survive. 4 years to make a decision.
Look, the good thing, Bobby, and I know exactly who you're talking about, and I agree. And look, by the way, we flew across the country. We trained all the pros, if you remember. We trained the front desk and everyone, but nothing happened. But again, everyone has a different pace. There's always something that triggers someone to take a decision, right? Either it's a leap of faith, either it's because the pain point's too big, either it's because someone they trust told them something and not a salesperson or someone saying, buddy, I know what you need. who are you to tell me what I need? So that's why I say, look, you can walk into a meeting and expect to do a sale in the next hour, day, week, month. You just don't know everyone's psychology. So the idea was, look, the more meetings you have, the more opportunities you have to close a deal, right? And I think that's one thing that's extremely important is sales. Look, the more phone calls, the more emails, the more conversations that you're having, the better outcome you'll get. If you're just waiting for your phone to ring, unfortunately, that's not going to happen unless you're Google or, you know, one of the big companies. And that's one thing that we learned very, very early on.
But again, but how do you remain sane? This is the fun part. And again, it speaks volumes to you as the person you are. Another organization here in Atlanta, very big. We, again, won't go into names. We signed them. And we started, because you can track. And the great part, like you said, well, you're not seeing any movement going on. They're not using, well, Debbie at the front desk really does. She's been with us for 15 years, and she really doesn't like automated. Debbie at the front desk, all the partners in the business said, this is what we're going to do. And Debbie at the front desk was stopping the implementation. And it happened. It was crazy.
We don't want robots coming in, taking over our jobs, Bobby.
You know, it's funny, Shaun, you say that, because I heard that quite a bit. And I'm like, you know, I somewhat understand. But my argument was like, look, the club's going to make more money, not less. You're still there. There's more bookings. There's more private lessons. There's more coaching. There's more clinics. So it's only good for the club. And someone that's been good to the club will now be there and have more time for the members, has more time to do so much more. And I think that's one thing that, you know, clubs tend to forget. Yes, you're right. Some clubs today are fully automated. Through technology, you can have hardware linked to it. You can open the gate of the door with a PIN number. The lights go on. You finish playing, the lights go off. Yes, that's also part of the industry, but you don't need to go to that extreme, right?
But
the
no
club
one wants to think that their job, excuse me, sorry. No one wants to think that their job can be coded away. Like, that's the good thing about the tennis pro, right? So we're the guy, me playing with a kid, you can't create a software that's going to replace me. Yet maybe that is a thing that can be done. So I don't want to pressure you, but in theory, like, we feel like we're irreplaceable, right? But that front desk staff would be like, wait a minute, we bring in these guys to automate the club. Wait a minute, what? Then where am I on the street?
Look, again, you know, I think it's a mentality thing, and you can't change people's mind about it. Technology has evolved in an incredible way in the last 20 years. We've seen what's going on in every industry. I think the racket sport is no different. It's just a little slower. And I think that if we see numbers about tennis, and let's take COVID out of it, tennis is not growing right now. I think it's something that, you know, for me, that's so passionate about the sport, is a little sad. And I think that if tennis was just more accessible, more people would play. And today you have the pickleballers of the world that have come with something that's incredible, is the fact that, you know, the learning curve is so much shorter and people want to have fun. People want to exercise. And I think if tennis doesn't do a better job to promote itself, you know, I don't see how it's going to grow.
Let's take it accessible.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So what I mean,
how do you define that?
Sorry, and thanks for asking that. What I'm saying by accessible is that there's north of 70,000 facilities across North America. And again, so many are difficult to find. I'm talking about accessible from a geographical standpoint, from a finding them, right? Whether it is a private club, a city park, or whatever, how do you find them? There's no database. There's nothing that you can really to do that.
Google doesn't do
USTA.
that?
Well, yeah,
that's
you
the
can
obvious
try.
question, right?
You can try Google, and Google will give you a phone number that you have to call that, you know, is not valid anymore, and no one's going to pick up because the front desk person. So, you know, it's just so challenging. Look, I came from Switzerland to the US, and I was like, and I'm not saying Switzerland is any better, by the way, but I came to the US and saying, look, I want to play tennis. Okay, so I have to be a member in this club to play. Is there no other place? You go into Google, you try to find. It should be just so much easier, and that's what technology brings.
Well, I'm going to take advantage of the personal relationship for a moment, because I've allowed him to say Switzerland 5 times without bringing anything up. And again, this speaks to the character and the humility of the man. It might have come up much later. Certainly wasn't the first time that I met Walid, that he is a friend of somebody who is also from Switzerland. And, you know, I would just mention it to the players at my club and who had seen Walid at various times at the club. And then one night he was at that in that certain person's box at the US Open. And the next day I was inundated with, oh my God, we saw Walid in somebody's box. And I said, I told you that. Well, we didn't believe you because everybody, and I said, well, that's Walid. So Walid, you can take that and go wherever you want with it. You can end right there and we can go back
no, look, I'll continue. I won't just leave it there. But so, Switzerland's a small country, and one of my very dear friends is Roger Federer. And I think that one thing that was incredible with my friendship with Roger is that I'll never see tennis the same way as I have for the last 15, 20 years, thanks to him, because being one of his close friends and having access to so many tournaments and people, it really, I was always passionate about tennis, but seeing it from the professional side was just so incredible, because there's so many people that are passionate and live thanks to tennis. And with Roger, Mirka, and the family, it was just incredible traveling with them through all those years. And it was so interesting because one conversation I had with Roger back at the time before I started Kourts, and I was telling him and his wife, and as a matter of fact, his parents as well, I'm telling them about Kourts. Roger told me, look, even for him at the time when he was nobody, just a tennis player, he's like, we struggled to find tennis courts to go and practice when we were doing, whether it's interclubs across Switzerland or juniors across Europe. It was a nightmare for them to try and find clubs, book a court before a tournament to practice. So when I spoke to him about Kourts, he's like, this just makes so much sense. So it was just so interesting to see someone that has a different view on tennis, because, obviously professional players, it's a complete different way of seeing things than recreational tennis. But at the end of the day, it's the same passion for the same sport. So I have to thank Roger for and the team to have introduced to me to so many different people in the industry, which really did help. And again, keeping that passion for the sport alive. It was incredible.
And real quick with Wally, one of my favorite responses when I asked him, well, why don't we see you more at the events? He goes, well, most of the time, and as he referred, Uncle Wally is not given the time because he's with the kids when they get to see him, especially when he was traveling from the States. They didn't get to see him as much. So his time was kind of accounted for. So I love that story.
Absolutely. No,
so back to business. You said something a couple of times now, which we like because we share similar thoughts. So do you think the idea of creating, whether it be an app environment in which the courts are located, and with taking the burden off the facility on making a decision on whether or not they're going to use the facility, but making the public aware of what the facility has to offer, is that a good jumping off spot?
Yeah. So look, it's been tried before. Playtennis.com, that belongs to the USTA, that at the time with TIA on the TIA website, what they tried to do, and they did a great job, they tried to list as many facilities in the country on that website. So you put your zip code and you can see all the different facilities around you. The problem is it's a static database, meaning they've entered it once. If the phone numbers change, if the club closes, if there's very little information about it. So that's a bit of the downfall of having a static database that way. And that's really the reason for us when we build Kourts. We were like, well, look, let clubs put what they want to put up. Pictures of their club, opening hours, closing hours, a phone number. Let them do whatever they want. But at least it was something that's dynamic. Right? If their timings change, they have to change it, because otherwise people are going to make bookings at 7 a.m. when they only open now at 8 in the winter or something. So really the idea, I think, and technology, not to go too much into business, but to try and stay into tennis, but the important thing is, we talked about the end user and we talked about the clubs, but what's important in technology is if clubs don't embrace technology, players can't use technology. What I mean by this is that if your club, Bobby, was not using Kourts, well, the end users would not be able to book unless they called you. So it's really a question of having the supply of clinics, of courts, of pros on, whether it's a website or on an app. And the more supply you have, naturally, the more people will come. And I think this is one thing that's important in business, and especially in technology, as I just mentioned, is that supply factor. So for us, what was important is every single time we signed a new club, we had 500 new users, right? So instead of going from user to user, you go to a club and you explain the pain point to a club. The club brings, their members on board. You have 500 new players. They get to see other clubs, to go and play elsewhere. That's how you try and build a marketplace. And to that point, it was so funny. And just in case, before you go to the next question, because yes, if you're a member, you can book in your club, but you can see other clubs around. And I had that comment from so many people saying, wait, I don't want my players to see other clubs. I'm like, yeah, that's a pretty small way of seeing things, because we have more than 500,000 people on Kourts that will not only see their club, but see yours as well.
Exactly.
And I think this is where, that was an important message.
Trying to convince the coaches that it's not a zero-sum game.
Absolutely.
Like, let's do this for the good of the peoples. Say, hey, look, what's mine is mine, is that old mentality of they're mine, and I'm going to charge them, and you can't have them. But if I put my club out there, I can get everybody else's people. Look, yeah, but we're all doing the same. We're all going to put our club out there, and let's see. You know what? That's going to mean you're going to have to be better. You're gonna have to get better at running your drills and being a better pro. It's going to increase the customer service. It's going to improve the lessons. It's going to improve everything if you actually have to compete, and it's going to increase everybody's numbers.
Absolutely. Look, the US is one of the best countries for that when it comes to people making reviews. You go to a restaurant, I don't know how they have time to say, hey, my smoked salmon wasn't good, my steak wasn't cooked enough, or whatever. But now, look, everyone's going to go travel. You'll go into a website, you look at the reviews. You're right, Shaun. People are going to have to up their game, because otherwise, like, wait, these guys keep saying that the locker room's dirty. Well, if it's true, do something about it.
That's our tagline: up your game. GoTennis, up your game. It's not a zero-sum game. There's all kinds of tennis. There's all kinds of players. There's all kinds of coaches. We got all the numbers. Everybody's there. We supply what you want. Everybody gets on it. Up your game. This forces you to get better. Now, I think a lot of people don't want to have to get better. I've got my little thing. This is what I do. I'm fine.
I don't think they don't want to get better. I think that they think this is going to last. But the problem is, well, I think, they haven't had to get better for years. But today, things are changing. Technology, again, for the last 20 years has changed. And the new generation, I have bad news for private clubs. I keep saying it. Look, a new generation is going to say, look, I pay for what I use. If I pay tennis once, I want to pay once. I pay for what for what I use. And I think that, the private old club where you have to be a member and you have to buy a share is great. Look, these are beautiful clubs, and I cannot agree more from that standpoint. But from a business standpoint, I think, get ready for change.
That might work.
And we talked about it.
Yeah.
Right. So Connecticut, that's great. But Bobby and I look at it, that's not a bad idea. I think the same way about my cable television service. I don't need 1,500 channels. I would like to pay $5 for the tennis channel, $5 for the soccer channel, and I'm done.
Yep. You're right. But that's where we're going. I have no doubt that that's where we're going, and that's how technology can really help and help consumers. And, and consumers are the ones paying at the end of the day. So, yeah, you're 100% right.
Well, we avoided it, and we didn't want to talk about USTA bashing. But
it's so much fun.
But it's fun. But part of it, isn't it the lack of institutional leadership in the sport that lends itself to? I always laugh that when there's a new position, higher ranking position open in tennis, we go fill it by another person who was in tennis. And if we sit there and say for the last 30 years, we've all been watching the decline of tennis popularity, why do we keep going to the same old well? Like you said, you keep doing it, it's not broke, but it's also, you keep doing it and you don't get a different result. It's the fine line between that and the definition of insanity. So when does tennis go outside of tennis? I always laugh, why didn't they hire the CEO of NASCAR who was able to market an event where everybody knew you only made left turns? Or why don't you go to the WWE where you're marketing an event where everybody knows that the ending is predetermined and they still pack the seats? Here you have right now players playing at an unprecedented level, athleticism the game has never seen. It should be enjoying a boom beyond just what COVID created. And yet the leadership, there's a lot to be said of whether or not they're capitalizing on the situation.
So look, I'll tell you, and as I said earlier, I'm not part of the ones that bash the USTA, but I think as I said, change is needed in every industry, and I look at what the USTA do, and I've had many conversations even before starting Kourts. I had conversations with the USTA, told them what our plan was. They said, "Look, this is great. We'd love to be part of this." And I said, "Sure, but by the time your board takes a decision, we would have built this and we'll be scaling it, right?" So that's one. I think one of the issues is just that when you have a ship the size of the USTA, to change course is just so complicated. First of all, you have to convince the board. Once you've done that, you have to have the right people in place to do it. And look, I think that, I'm someone that runs a business that's there to make money. When you look at an institution like the USTA, I don't think the motivation is at the level where, change happens quickly. That's one of the important things. From a technology standpoint, that USTA has tried, and I keep saying, look, you guys are not a technology company. Hire the right people to go and do that. I think there's a lot of, and in a corporate world as well, there's a lot of politics, and unfortunately, politics costs a lot of money and slow a lot of the process down. I cannot talk for the USTA on how they're set up, how their board is set up. I've heard so many stories and horrible stories, unfortunately. And sometimes I just wish that the USTA listened to what people were saying, and we're like, look, you know what? Let's listen to the tennis world and see what the need is. I always felt that every single time I had a meeting with the USTA, they were telling the tennis world what tennis needed. I'm like, well, maybe listen to what people want, and this is how you can take decisive actions. Sorry.
Well, I think we've got a size problem there too, because I would guess the USTA of Switzerland doesn't have 350 million people it's trying to manage. So we have the same problem governmentally. If we step into the political question, we're trying to institute. When Bobby used institutionalize this kind of decision making, I think the word institutional has kind of gone away to be a bad thing, because it's usually followed by racism or something bad, right? Institutional. Yeah. But in this case, are we looking for an institutional change that's good on such a high level and such a large scale that just doesn't fit more people than it does?
But don't forget, you have 17 sections for the USTA, right? So you have South California, right? That again, are completely different than some of the other sections. And I think that, that's the great thing of having those different sections. But the way it's set up internally has always been something that struck me as like, well, how efficient is that? Look, I can't speak on behalf of the USTA. I just wish we could have built, more with them and helped them grow the sport of tennis. And they chose another path, and I hope that they set up a website, and I hope it works, and I hope pros get happy with it, and clubs. I know it was a nightmare at the beginning. Servetennis.com. I really advise everyone to go and look at it and see if there's something to take from it. I do hope it is the case, and it'll grow and getting better.
I'm really glad they did it, because it will show us what the USTA is capable of, being, as you say, not a technology company.
Absolutely. Look, if you're good at something, focus on that. Don't try to do different things. But if technology is required, bring the right people in to develop the technology side of the business. And that's for across all industries and, of course, all federations. I'm not talking here about just the USTA. And to come back to your comment about Switzerland, look, yeah, Switzerland is 7 million people. So the Swiss Tennis Federation does not have the same job, but it doesn't have the same budget. Everything's just so different, right? So it's difficult to try and compare. But that's why I'm saying there's different sections across the USTA that breaks the nation down to different regions.
And the craziness of Georgia being one of 8 states, and yet probably has more players within a 70-mile radius than the other 7 states combined. So
absolutely, very true.
Well, before we let you go, and we could do this forever, Walid, thanks for taking the time to being with us today. And we hope that you'll come back and talk to us again. It's been great. As always, great catching up. My last question for you before Shaun gives you the overriding question of the day: what's next for you? And I think we're okay to talk about that now, right?
Of course. We didn't talk much about the history of Kourts, as I mentioned earlier. The idea in 2015 went live in 2017. Just before COVID, we were approached to be acquired, and I was like, look, this is pretty early on when you look at the mission that we had to grow the sport of tennis. But, at the end of the day, we thought, look, it's a conversation that's healthy to have. We're a team of 30 people at Kourts. Let's see where this goes. And as we were having this conversation, COVID started. So everything went onto, ice. I think it's across every single industry. And then in 2021, we had this incredible company called Playtomic out of Spain reach out to us. They were doing a lot of acquisitions. They acquired a lot of businesses that were similar to Kourts, but not across the US. They were doing that across Europe. And when they came to us, they were like, look, you're the biggest marketplace across North America. We love what you guys have been doing. We've been following it. We're really interested in joining forces. And I was like, look, for me, and I really truly believe this, being part of something bigger will help you to grow faster. So that was one of our motivations to say, look, you know what? Let's have a proper conversation about a merge or an acquisition and see if we can join force, be bigger, stronger, and grow tennis faster. So that was really the main motivation when we did that deal. We started this conversation in early 2021, did the deal in September 2021. I, for personal reasons, decided back in a couple of months ago in June to relocate and not stay in America. As I said, I was born and grew up in Switzerland, but spent a lot of my years in Dubai and the UAE. Dubai has given me a lot, so I had decided with my girlfriend to relocate. And and I think Bobby, you were mentioning before, did we not get tired of trying to sell and hit our heads against the wall? It had become a little tiring. And when you're so passionate about something and you can't grow it as fast as you want, it gets to you after a while. So joined Playtomic and started the run with them, and stepped down a couple of months ago, and now relocating here to Dubai. So as you said earlier, rebuilding a house. It's a fun project. What's next? I have the great option of saying we'll see, and we'll take some time off and look at it. So right now, a lot of traveling is coming up. And I have no doubts that, something, again, that I'll be passionate about will pop up. But I believe that if you're passionate about something, invest your time in it, because this is how, you fulfill your life. If you do something that you're not excited about, it's a long day.
Well, for selfish reasons, we hope you stay close.
Sorry, Shaun, I didn't hear you. I heard Bobby.
Oh, gotcha. I said, well, if you're looking for something and you're wondering what's next, we've got something to send you.
I'll let Shaun send it, since my technological ability has not made it happen yet. So we'll just leave it at that. All right, Shaun, ask the big question of the day.
Oh yeah, our favorite last question, and you're fun one to ask this because you're more global than most of the conversations we have, since we're focused in Atlanta mostly, is if you were king of tennis. And obviously you come from a technology point of view. You've talked about the mission of Kourts being to grow tennis. You want to help tennis. It doesn't sound like you're trying to create the next Roger Federer. It's more about growing tennis for a love of the sport. And so I often try to assume guess what people are going to say when I ask them, and take their personality and say, I'll bet he's going to go this way with the answer. But if you were king of tennis, whether it's global or even just in Atlanta, I'd probably lean you toward global. I think that might be a fun question to ask. King of tennis, Walid Fattah, what do you do?
Look, if I'm the king of tennis, good question. I didn't see that one come. I was talking earlier about my passion for the sport, and this is a passion that will always stay. I cannot wait before I get on a court and hit some balls. And I want to try and obviously share that with as many people as possible, because I just think that from a non-team sport. I know in America there's a lot of team sports, but from a non-team sport, tennis is just so fulfilling. I think that at the end of the day, when you can go and hit balls, you'll forget so many issues that you've had that day. So going back to my background in technology, and that was always the mission we were on, is try and make tennis more accessible. And that's exactly what I would do. I'd make sure that people can find a court, a clinic, juniors. Bring the juniors on. I mean, they're the players of tomorrow. And I think that if you don't make it easier for a parent to book a tennis court, well, their daughter or their son, and no disrespect for other sports or arts, will go and play piano instead. And I love piano, so I have no issues with that. But I just think tennis is just such a fulfilling sport. It's a challenging sport as well. Again, when you're on your own on the court, you're on your own fighting your opponent. Tennis is one of the only sports. Boxing, you have the end of the round, you speak to your coach. He says, hey, what you doing? In tennis, you're not allowed, right? You're on your own against your opponent. I think it's one of the greatest life experience that you can have. When you're in trouble at work or anything, who's there to help you? You know, you have to stand on your 2 feet, and I think tennis is incredible for that. And if I was king of tennis, I'd just make sure that, you know, I share that, and I make tennis as fun as and accessible as possible, so that more and more people can pick that sport up.
Well, and I'll put you on the spot with that answer, because we hear that a lot. We'd like to make it more accessible, or we want to make it more affordable, or we want to make it more this or more that. When you say, okay, I would make it more accessible, and you've been one of the ones to go out and actually have a potential solution and say, you know what, here's how I've spent money, lots of money, trying to make this happen, and we're actually working to make it more accessible. I appreciate that, because you've actually come with a solution. And most people say, oh yeah, I'd make tennis more accessible for the people. Well, how are you going to do that? Yeah. And that's always the question. And when Bobby asks what's next, my ears perk up. I'm like, this is a tennis is accessible guy, but you're also a guy actually going to potentially come up with the next solution.
Well, look, we tried this one. It was a great run, and I'm sure we've helped clubs, we've helped players. We got incredible messages from players saying, you know, thank you for what you've built. And I think this is something that motivates us more than anything at that point. You know, I haven't given up on tennis. We'll see, but definitely, I think that if ever I do anything else in tennis, it's making it broader, making it more fun, as I said, more accessible, and you know, and look, you have clubs that are all whites, and younger kids won't enjoy that, and they'll prefer doing something different. So every sport has to evolve, and tennis is no different.
Well, Walid, thank you again for your time. I love the message on Field of Dreams Day. I don't know if anybody else knows that. This is the origin movie, and they're playing the baseball game today at the Iowa cornfield. So the fact that we were so Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Great synergy for the day. We look forward to hearing what you have in the future. We look forward to hopefully you including us, and you know, we will be calling, and I will be calling, asking advice, and look forward to getting you back here as soon as you can.
And look, you're always welcome, and thanks so much for your time today, and for the opportunity to you know, have me speak. It's really been a pleasure, and I'm never too far, as you know, as you guys know. So thanks again so much, and continue what you're doing. It's important for people to hear so much about, you know, what you're doing as well, and for tennis it's a very positive thing.
Thank you, my friend. I miss you.
Take care. Thanks so much again.